Hello everyone and welcome to the BFI Future Film Festival 2023. My name is Nick Willis and I'm a BFI Film Academy Young Programmer, and I'm also a freelance designer and a filmmaker and just general film poster buff. So I'm super excited to be bringing you a filmmaker's guide to movie poster design. Are you a filmmaker in the process of or recently having made a film, working on a marketing strategy to get your film in front of the right people? If the answer is a yes, then this is the event for you. As a filmmaker, your film poster is one of, if not the most important tool you have, along with your trailer, to promote your film to prospective audiences. A film poster is a bit like an actor's headshot and can be the reason someone chooses to watch your film or not. But best of all, it doesn't necessarily require a ton of resources or expertise to produce something really creative and unique. That is where this event comes in. In the first section of this video, we're going to do a brief whistle-stop tour through the history of film poster design, followed by talking about the design basics and key elements that make up a film poster, with lots of visual examples, so that in the second part of the event, you can practically apply that knowledge you've learned as I take you through the steps to create your own poster for your film. Timestamps are included in the description below, so feel free to jump around to whichever part suits you best. And don't worry if you're not a designer already, this event has been created especially to take you through the whole process so that people of all experiences can take something away. As much as I'd love to, we don't have the time to talk about absolutely everything to do with film poster design in this one video. So all the examples that I give are just my opinions of great film posters, and you might completely disagree with that, and that's totally cool. Please do leave your favourite film posters in the comments below and let's get a discussion going. But that's enough chat, let's get started. So, where does the film poster come from? The first recorded film poster was for the 1895 fictional comedy short film Laurels à José by Louis Lumière, one half of the Lumière brothers, who are commonly attributed as the grandfathers of cinema and the inventors of the cinématographe. The poster was illustrated by Marcel Ozol for the world's first commercial film screening at the Grand Café Paris on December 28, 1895. From then on, illustrated film posters took off and became key in the rise of cinema distribution. By the 1920s, the golden age of silent cinema, illustrated scenes taken from stills of the film became the go-to design choice. Gradually, the detailed scene illustrations made way for character portrait illustrations in the 30s and 40s. They favoured a blank background focusing on the film's main characters with interesting typography. Come the time of the 50s, a post-war audience craved more fantastical escapist stories, which were reflected by the rise of more conceptual abstract designs, often not including any characters at all. This continued through to the 60s, where great influence was taken from the Polish school of posters for their minimalist yet bold aesthetic. But then, during the 1970s, the painted posters began to phase out and were replaced by photography-led designs for the first time, which then became the norm in the 1980s. And since then, the change has slowed immensely as designers seem to have found the successful blueprint layout. By no means is it essential to stick to, but the standard elements that make up this poster layout are important to familiarise yourself with, even if you decide to then throw it all out the window. It's good to know the rules first before you can break them. So, let's take a look at what makes up a film poster. The first thing to be aware of is that there are numerous poster formats across the globe. Here in the UK, the quad or quad crown landscape poster, 30 by 40 inches, is the most favoured in cinemas and in distribution. However, the portrait one sheet, 27 by 40 inches, originating in the US, has become the more universally used size around the world, in part due to the rise of the importance of social media in film distribution, and the simple fact that a portrait poster matches your phone's aspect ratio a lot better than a landscape one. There are more cultural variations in format across the globe, but for the sake of time and the most versatile option, we're going to be focusing on one sheets in this video. Mainly because, as filmmakers, you're most likely going to need your poster for portrait favouring sites like Instagram, Letterboxd, IMDb, and Film Freeway when you're submitting your film for festivals. As we established earlier in our quick history recap, there are many different styles of film posters and no real defined rules, but I like to break them down into these three main categories. The character portrait poster. These types of posters tend to use film stills, production photography, or studio photography to create character-focused designs. This is probably the most common type of poster we see at the moment, popularised by the controversial floating heads design from a certain major studio. And typically, these posters rely on big-name celebrities to help draw in cinema-goers. The illustrated poster. Used a lot more in the first half of the 20th century, hand-drawn film posters have become synonymous with classic cinema. As technology advanced, this super time-consuming method grew less and less popular. However, there has been a bit of a recent resurgence in this style, with more posters being drawn by hand, both traditionally and digitally. The symbolism poster. These posters don't rely on famous actors' faces to grab your attention and sell you tickets. Instead, they try to build mystery and intrigue through symbolic imagery, often a key prop in the film or a visual representation of a key theme in the film. One of the most iconic examples of this is Hitchcock's Vertigo, which definitely captures the eye through its minimalist imagery and bold use of colour. Now, let's take a look at your short film. In many ways, you could probably make either of these three styles fit your film. However, there's probably one that will suit it best, and that will depend on a couple of key factors: your film's target audience and the film's story itself that you're trying to convey through the poster. Your target audience. Hopefully you should know this already after working on your film's production, but it's best to get as specific as possible. Essentially, your poster is at the forefront of a marketing campaign, and for the best response to your film, that campaign needs to be targeted at the right people. There are lots of factors to take into account when determining your target audience. Gender identity, ethnicity, sexuality, location, and age are some of the most prevalent. And it may feel odd or maybe even uncomfortable to dissect your audience like this, but remember to have faith in the work that you do and how, if put in front of the right people, your film could have a massive impact on them. Genre is going to be a really big factor to consider too. Is it a coming-of-age comedy with humour directed at teens, or is it a crazy body horror film which has definitely got an adult audience? Whatever it is, it's going to affect your target audience, and therefore it's really important to bear in mind when establishing your demographic. Gather some references of other film posters and even adverts that share the same target audience as you. Are they successful? Why or why not? Are there any patterns you can spot amongst the designs? Certain repeated colour combinations, styles of fonts, type of imagery used? Sites such as shortfilmposters.com, Mubi, or even a quick simple Google search are great places to find lots of examples. Visually speaking, one of the first things that's going to impact your design, and something we just touched on, is genre. Now, if you were to picture what that body horror film poster looks like, it's going to look very different to that teen coming-of-age comedy. And one of the simplest ways in design to convey genre is with colour. And so I want you to bear that in mind during this next section, as that's an idea we're going to come back to in more depth shortly. When trying to present your film's story through a poster, you have to boil everything down into the specifics. What is the core message of your film? What is it that you want the people you've decided as your target audience to feel or take away when watching it? Try this. Similar to how you might write a logline to help pitch a script, try writing 1 or 2 maximum sentences that describe the themes at the heart of your film. What is your story really about? Keep it concise, and whatever it is, write it down. And then, take a highlighter and highlight all the key words. Here's an example that I wrote for the beloved 2016 Sundance Prize-winning short film, Thunder Road, from actor, director and writer Jim Cummings. The film was then later adapted in 2018 to a feature of the same name. And as you can see, the words that I've highlighted here are grief, unexpected and humour. So let's now take a look at the actual film poster. Hopefully you can see how each of those 3 words relate to this design. Grief is represented in the physical depiction of a coffin with a woman's photo, who we presume is his mother, and a symbolic pair of ballet shoes resting on top. The humour is represented through the pose of the protagonist, something that you wouldn't necessarily expect at a funeral or film about grief, especially given the costume that he's wearing. And the unexpected colour choices of the pink and red, in addition to the characters posing, let you know that genre-wise this is probably going to be quite a bold comedy. The overall tone of the poster gives off the vibes that it's perhaps an independent film without a massive budget, and that is a part of the film's charm. The film's target audience isn't the mass market, but from the poster you get the sense it's for people who will want to laugh and cry whilst watching something original. Now this poster isn't complicated at all and uses the character portrait poster style with a few additional symbolic elements to really convey the film's story, in my opinion successfully, in one singular image. You can find the link to Thunder Road in the description below, so you can have a watch and decide for yourself how effective you think the movie poster is at representing the film. There is also a link to a case study done by Sundance on the film's feature version, which has tons of transferable marketing, distribution, audience development tips and tricks. I hope this example has shown you that by breaking your film down into simple thematic components that are then represented by a combination of well-shot imagery, text, and interesting colour choices, you can create a really successful and memorable design. Speaking of colour, just like a cinematographer uses it to convey a film's tone, poster designers do the exact same thing. And colour psychology in design is a fascinating area, and when you start to consciously notice the trends and patterns, you can quite quickly see how certain colours symbolise different tones and genres of film. For example, the colour yellow has become a bit of a symbol of the indie comedy, and as poster designer James Soto once said, yellow is a cheap way to catch the eye. And one of the most iconic uses of yellow in a film poster is the 2006 film Little Miss Sunshine. There's a certain degree of naivety and optimism about a yellow poster which will definitely get people to stop and look. Blue is often used for thrillers and features dynamic lighting and extreme camera angles. Black, white and orange is the classic action combo. Bonus points if you have Bruce Willis, Jason Statham or Vin Diesel's face on it. Black or red is the cliche choice for a horror film. I guess red equals blood, so there you go. Although some clever horror films do break this rule to create something more unique. Red and white for a zany 2000s comedy, most likely a rom-com with two characters featured on a blank white background, and the cliches just go on and on. But joking aside, the use of colour is a really important element of poster design to help you accurately convey your film's tone. So I would suggest doing some basic research into colour psychology to see what matches the themes that you explore within your film, as some of the best poster designs are the ones that subvert genre expectation of certain colours. Using more than one colour when designing, such as complementary colours, can be a great bet, just like a DOP might use them when lighting their shots. For example, the most popular complementary colour combo is orange and blue, or teal, which is often used for fantasy or sci-fi films. However, colours such as pink and yellow and red and green can be used really effectively too. Now we've spoken a bit about a poster's imagery, let's take a look at some of the technical requirements. Displaying the film's title may sound obvious, but it is actually really important. Is it massive, taking up the whole of the poster, or is it very small and subtle? Is it in a bold sans serif font, or a more quaint serif or handwritten font? Or is it just not there at all? Taglines on posters can be a great way to capture someone's attention and help persuade them to watch your film. They don't work for every kind of film, I'd say, but if it's more concept-based, then it could be a really good idea to use one to help sell your film's unique premise. And the best types of taglines seem to use a sense of irony, whether exclusively within the words or when paired with the film poster's imagery. Billing on movie posters is probably the most standardised element of the design and hasn't really changed from the early film posters. The billing block is found at the bottom of the poster and contains all of the key contributors on the film, alongside studio logos, social media handles, release dates, etc. Typically, this is all negotiated contractually, and there can be quite specific rules about, say, the size of the billing font in comparison to the title font. And then there's top billing, which is where usually a famous actor's name will be listed at the top of the poster above the title. Although this isn't exclusively for actors, sometimes this is the case for notable writers or directors. As I'm sure you can imagine, this can quite quickly become very complex with who gets first position, second position, and so on. So, on a small budget film, I wouldn't worry too much about this. I would just focus on including who were the key people who helped you make the film. Finally, if you're lucky enough for your film to play at some festivals or receive some great reviews, you might want to think about including them on your poster to try and convince people that watching your film is worth their time. So it may seem obvious, but be sure to leave some space on the poster so that you can fit laurels and quotes as and when they come in. You want to make sure it looks purposeful and not like you've just squeezed them in after the fact. I hope now you have a better understanding of film poster fundamentals. Everything I've spoken about so far are all just guidelines and can totally be ignored if you think something else might sell your story more effectively. Distilling your film into one image isn't easy, but with some creative thinking, which as filmmakers you already possess, the possibilities are endless. Hopefully this event so far and all the examples shown has helped spark some inspiration, but if you're still struggling to come up with a poster design concept, try reminding yourself and answering the following questions. Try and be as specific as you can with your answers. Who is your film's target audience? Why is your film's story an important one to tell? What are people going to take away from watching your film? What makes your film unique to other films in the same genre or exploring similar themes? What is at the heart of your story? Is it a character-driven film? In which case, a character portrait poster style with film stills or photography might be the best route to take. Or is it a more setting or concept-driven film? In which case, a more symbolic poster with a catchy tagline might be more suitable. Hopefully this has got your brain thinking as we're about to dive into the demo portion of this event. During this demo, I'm going to be taking you through my creative process when designing a film poster. I'm going to share with you my ideas, how I use reference to create them, and then how I implement them into my design, as well as touching on some practical tips and tricks of how to make the most of the software that you're using. Speaking of software and tools, you're going to want some kind of hardware, so whether that's a laptop or a computer or even a tablet or an iPad can work. And then you're going to want some software. Now I'm going to be using Adobe Photoshop as that is the industry standard. However, this is a paid software, but I would recommend taking advantage of the 7-day free trial that they offer. Or if you're still in full-time education, it's worth checking with your kind of college, university, school, as it might be you can get a discount or even get it free through them. Or you might even have access to it already if you have the Creative Cloud using After Effects or Premiere Pro, for example. But if you are looking for completely free open source programs, there are some such as GIMP, Paint.net and Critter, which are all really great for what they do, but personally I think Photoshop is the most versatile option and I would suggest nabbing that free trial if you can. The first thing you're going to want to think about is, where is this poster ultimately going to sit? Is it going to be an exclusively digital poster, or is it one that you want to print out and have physical copies of? Because this is going to affect A, your color profile, and B, your resolution. Your color profile, typically we work in RGB for online images, or we work in CMYK, which is typically for printing things out. So if you are going to be printing something out, it's worth checking with your printers to see what specifications they require, as they are also most likely going to want a bigger canvas size and higher resolution, whereas for this poster, because this is going to be a digital design, I can get away with making it a bit smaller, so the file size isn't as big. In this demo, I'm going to be creating a poster for the 2019 Oscar-winning Parasite. Now, the reason I chose this film is for its extensive themes, which you can analyse, its ability to genre bend, so there's a lot to play with in terms of its content, and so therefore I can create a design which incorporates elements of the 3 different poster styles that we spoke about in the first half of the event. So the way that I start my design process is I take a look back at my sentence that I wrote. So you can see my one here that I wrote for Parasite, and the key words that I've highlighted are class divide, greed and manipulation. And I then use this as a basis to create a bit of a mood board. And here you can see lots of different images that I've picked up from other film posters and adverts that I found, and how I then reference different elements of each of these I'll get into a bit more later on. So for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my first image, and if I reference back to my mood board, you can see these images here where I really liked the use of the silhouette kind of paper cutout And so I wanted to bring this into my design because I think this kind of silhouetted figure really kind of links to the themes of kind of class and kind of the manipulation and the sort of the facade that the different characters put on within the film. Photoshop works in very similar ways to building up a traditional piece of art in terms of layering your different elements on top of each other. So I'm going to bring in another image. This time it's a film still. So the first image I brought in was a production photo, and just in case you don't know the difference, a production photo is something that is specifically taken on set by a separate camera. There will be someone taking production photos, and typically they are meant to kind of resemble film stills, but they're just of a better quality because they're a photo in its own right. Whereas film stills are literally taking a still from the footage that you recorded. Most of the time it's better to work with production photos because they are better quality. However, here, because I'm going to apply some effects to it, I can get away with using some film stills. Now, the reason I've chosen this specific one is that it is the drawing that Da Song does within the film, and there's a lot of plot around this idea of trauma being manipulated and how Jessica is kind of manipulating his trauma for her personal gain to get the family into the house. So therefore, I think it's a really interesting image to put underneath the silhouettes of the Kim family. I'm also taking advantage of the filter gallery within Photoshop and adding some texture to this image to not only build a bit of an aesthetic that matches my mood board, but also to help blend in this film still to make it look a bit more purposeful within the design. Now that I have my canvas covered, it's time to start bringing in more of those colours. Now for me, I want to opt for a complementary colour scheme. Now I'm going to choose red to overlay over the top of the drawing because it symbolises the kind of courage and passion, but also the sort of anger and love that gets all tied up within the two families. And then I'm going to be using green at the top of the poster around the Kim family silhouettes because of its connotation with greed and envy, which links back to my keywords that I highlighted. You can also bring in other images that aren't from your film. So here you can see that I found an image online. There are some great websites to get royalty-free images like pexels.com and pixabay.com. And so I found this kind of blood splatter, which I want to add to the bottom of the poster. And I'm just going to play around a little bit with the blending modes and add a sense of blur to make it a bit more kind of dynamic and also manipulate the image a bit more, which kind of ties back into my mood board and again the words. And essentially with poster design in general and working in Photoshop, the steps are always almost the same. You know, when you're bringing an image in, the first thing you want to do is isolate it. Whatever you're wanting from that image, is it the background? Is it all of it? Is it a specific element? You want to then isolate it, play around with the blend mode, seeing what works well when layered on top of everything else, and then going to the filter gallery and add some filters or effects or change the color. And that is essentially the process. And you just repeat that for all of the different elements that you're trying to bring into your design. And I'd say don't be afraid to change things up a bit. You can always save a copy of the file, open it up and go really wild with that design. And if you like it, then great. And if you don't, you can always go back to your original and work on that. But I find with poster design in general, the best way to get the most memorable designs is just to play around and experiment and just move things around until it looks right. And I think that's the best way to go with it. You don't want to limit yourself too strongly. So the poster's imagery is really starting to work now, and that's partly because of the compositional choice I've made to split up the poster into the rule of thirds. Now, not only does this make it more aesthetically pleasing to the eye, it feeds into the narrative and themes within the film. This idea that there are class divides and levels within the house. So at the top we've got the Kims, who have been fighting the whole film to make it up to the top, but I won't spoil the film, but things don't necessarily go the way that they plan. And then below them you have this drawing by Da Song, which is very reminiscent of the character of Gunse in the film. And you have this element right beneath them, this idea that there are things physically beneath them the whole time throughout the film, but also metaphorically. And then you have at the bottom this kind of red bloodshed, which again is a kind of hint towards the genre bend that the film takes. Now we have the film poster's imagery. It's all about those technical elements we spoke about earlier to really help transform this into our film poster. So obviously part part of that is adding the text. So I've added the title at the bottom of the page, again adhering to that rule of thirds composition, and I'm using a bold sans serif font called Mont. I found this font from defont.com, lots of rhyming, which is a great place to look for lots of different fonts, but you've got to make sure that you click the 100% free and public domain option so that you have the rights to use these fonts. And then I did the exact same thing, adding the billing block at the bottom, which we spoke about, using the font Tall, Dark and Handsome. Now, to show you there are lots of different ways to do similar things within Photoshop, I actually wrote out by hand a film by Bong Joon-ho on a bit of paper, took a photo of it, brought it into Photoshop, manipulated it with the blending modes, and now I've actually got a handwritten font which matches the oil pastel drawing. The finishing touch is adding in a laurel, which I spoke about at the end of the first part of this event, making sure that you leave space for them. See, there's lots of negative space in this design, so I could add on all of the different awards and accolades that Parasite won, but for this, I'm just going to stick with the Palme d'Or. And there we have it. Here is my final poster design for Parasite. I hope you like it and think that it's an effective poster for the film. And feel free to rewind and pause if you want to see any of the technical decisions that I made whilst making the poster, but I will also leave a link to a great video showing the Photoshop fundamentals to help you get started, as unfortunately we don't have time to cover absolutely everything in this video. But as a bonus, I have created a couple of extra Parasite poster designs here. As you can see, one I focused on a specific scene in the film and built a poster around that moment, and the other I layered lots of different images, played around with colour to try and lean in more to a certain horror genre for the poster. So basically, with poster design in general, it's all about trial and error. Get all of your elements, chuck them on the page and start moving them around to see what works. Play around with colour for different genres and play around with your font as well and the type of imagery, all to evoke a certain feeling. And you just want to keep going until you find something that is the perfect fit for your film. I also did a little fun one where I just turned Parasite into a straight out comedy, and it just goes to show the power of poster design and the immense impact that it can have on your audience. Thanks so much everyone for tuning into A Filmmaker's Guide to Movie Poster Design as part of the BFI Future Film Festival 2023. I really hope you found this video useful in making your film poster and planning your marketing campaign, and be sure to check out the description for a list of all of the resources that we've mentioned throughout the event. We would love to see anything that you create using this event, so please do share your posters with us at BFI Film Academy on Twitter and Instagram, and also be sure to leave your favourite film posters in the comments below. We really hope you enjoyed the festival. All of our online events will be available here on the BFI YouTube channel very soon, so be sure to check any out that you missed or fancy rewatching. Thanks again everyone for tuning in. Goodbye.